Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out how to become more involved by going to officehours.global. That's going to give you the links, show you other episodes, and how to get into the Zoom and into Mukana, and where you become an actual producer. Basically, once you're in Mukana, you are driving the conversation. Your questions, your votes. That's what we talk about. First hour is wide open. It's whatever you ask about media or virtual production. Second hour is usually something that we're a little bit more interested in. Today we have Terri Morgan from LumaTouch. She's going to be talking about LumaFusion. We've got new features, and we're excited to find out what they are. So we'll be talking about that in the second hour. If you have specific questions for Terri regarding LumaFusion, definitely throw them in the first hour and vote those questions up as well. Tomorrow, a reminder that we have education at 8 o'clock. We're moving it back to 8 from 9 o'clock, and it is not streamed. We found that our educators speak more freely when they're not on YouTube. So it's 8 o'clock. We'll do that 8 to 10, and so that'll be on Saturday. And then Sunday, of course, is just the hour the hours that we all just hang out. So that's what we have coming up. Let's go jump into the questions. Bill, what do we got?
Good morning, everybody. And the first one comes from James Babbitt in San Diego. And what are your thoughts on the new products that Blackmagic announced yesterday?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So I'll speak about the cameras. So I think at 1300 and 1800, those cameras fit very nicely into, well, the 1300 fits into kits. Very simple kit. It has literally one HDMI, simple lenses, cheap lenses, a lot of variety in lenses. Some lenses have powered zoom. And the cameras, as far as the more expensive camera, the essentially SMPTE optical like connection with the Ethernet is game changer if you're doing like a venue. Like if you're running cameras, like 4 or 5 cameras in a large venue, like a concert or something, or small concert, having just one cable come back to the switcher and that does everything, power, comms, tally. That's a game changer at that price point.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I agree with Carl talking about for the cameras. From my point of view, the Studio Plus camera will be the one that I'll be looking at because I have a switcher. But it's still very hard not getting the Pro one just because it's more Pro. But for normal studio use, I have lighting, I have the switcher. The Plus one is a perfect camera for studio setup and virtual meetings, I think.
Go ahead, George.
So 2 quick pieces for me. I really was hoping and praying for that television studio. It just sat there for the whole presentation and it was updated. But as far as production, timecode generator I can get 2 HyperDeck Mini Pluses and I could jam timecode into them now. A timecode generator will cost you anything from $2,000 and up. To have it now in all of their recording products, I think is excellent.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
2 things. One is about the cameras, but before we get to that, is it worth us dealing with all the Blackmagic questions? Because there's a ton, and just do them all at once. Because
we'll give our opinions and then we'll dive into it. Yeah, we'll just keep it quick. That's fine.
Okay. Well, the camera, yes. The top level one is going to be a game changer. Absolutely. There's only 2 things that are probably limiting it. Both of them we have questions in the queue about, but I will point out that the selection of lenses, like in the after hours, and Carl and I was discussing this, there's a very limited selection of lenses that can do all those features. And the one that Grant was using in the demonstration yesterday is a discontinued lens. So when people go to buy it at the moment, they're going to have problems getting the lenses to have all that functionality. So there has to be something coming in the future. Don't forget that Panasonic is one of the few companies that is supported with Blackmagic RAW. So there's communication there. So we can expect good quality, small TV lenses soon. Where that camera is going to find uses though, isn't just in small sports production or houses of worship. Corporate training is going to grab that camera faster than they'll be grabbing the pocket cameras at the moment. And for that usage, it's probably a better choice than the pocket cameras.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm curious, Alex, would you use the lower cost one in a kit? Would you consider that?
I don't shoot with smaller than Super 35, so it's not really my model. So you know, like I don't anything under 75 feet I'm always Super 35. I find I don't like the smaller chips. So and I notice it a lot and it bothers me. So so 4/3 is not really, is kind of a deal breaker for me. I definitely see the utilization in it, and I think that it's really powerful for a lot of people. It just doesn't fit my model for how I do production.
I think it would have been great if that whole viewfinder would have flipped up to be a confidence monitor. You know,
that'd be interesting. Yeah, I was excited just that I do love the new design. I think it's a lot better than the last design. So I you know, I think it's very valid product, and I think it's it'll be great for a lot of people. And I can see there was a time when we would have done it. But I'm pretty snooty about my chip size. It makes such a huge difference in depth of field, and it just looks much more. The problem that we have is that YouTubers are using A7Ss and things that have really large sensors, and they're used to looking at short depth of field. And when you increase the depth of field, literally people watching YouTube at a younger age will immediately think of you as traditional broadcast. My kids will literally identify stuff. I watch them identify it by short depth, long depth of field. To them is, oh, well, that's old. You know, like that, like they literally just kind of turn it off because they assume that it's not. If they see that deep depth of field on a show, because they're so used to watching YouTubers, and the YouTubers are all like razor sharp depth of field. And so as a result, you know, they don't know what it is. They don't know why. But I just noticed that they identify it really fast, you know, as something that's old, you know, not what they're used to. And so that's why it was observing my kids is what got me to stop using anything smaller than a Super 35, is because I just felt like I was dating my production process. Go ahead, Ken.
Just to point about the lenses, and it is discontinued, but that exact lens, and I will put a link all in Discord so that you can get them at a reasonable price. It's selling for, you know, $150.
Right.
Really good quality ones.
Yeah, I mean the good news is that Blackmagic is now, it's becoming way bigger than every other company making this kind of thing. People will start building lenses just for their cameras, you know, just because their cameras are doing it. Because I mean, they're now selling Atem minis. I mean, they're putting ads for them in National Geographic. I mean, you know, like they're at a whole different level than everyone else at the moment. Go ahead, Bill.
First, I just wanted to say bravo, Grant. And here's why. Grant Petty, I've been watching him do demos. He's gotten very, very much better at the demos. But beyond that, I noticed that he was hot plugging stuff constantly through the demo. And my one hassle about Blackmagic back in the old days is you had to plug in your computer to the other computer, because these things are mostly all computers, and they had to talk to each other. And sometimes it took a little bit of time. He was able to hot swap 30 things over the course of that demo. They all found each other and worked beautifully.
Highly,
so, bravo.
Highly technical and very, very dangerous stream. Unless they recorded it. It doesn't look like it was recorded. It looks like they streamed it. But if I would have recorded that, there were so many changes. I was like, they must have rehearsed that for weeks. You know, like if it was truly live. I don't know if it was or not, because he's not interacting. But if it was an actual live stream, that was insane. You know, it was just so many, and because the reason I think it might have actually been live is I didn't see any discontinuities in that process. Go ahead, David.
I saw an edit.
Oh, you saw an edit? Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
The new line of Hyperdecks, the HD Plus, has nice big buttons for big fat thumbs, and I've already got one on my wish list.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Just 2 quick points. One, I did actually go searching for power zooms, and the fastest 2 that have ever been available, as far as I can find, are a pair of Pentaxes from the film era, but unfortunately there's no electronic adapters to allow you to control them. But one thing you said there, Alex, about the depth of field, I got to push back on that a little bit, because the majority of YouTubers shoot on phone and GoPro. They don't shoot on DSLRs. It's the vloggers. The vloggers are shooting on things.
The high-end YouTubers are all A7S. I mean, it's like, I mean, I work with them.
In that case, we're probably
I'm talking about
worth having a second hour.
Yeah, it's like
have a second hour on who is a high-end YouTuber, because the ones I'm watching, it's no.
Okay.
There's just not anything there.
Good guy.
Yeah, the USB external on the Hyperdecks is a pretty big deal. I think a lot of people don't really get it, that being able to hook up an SSD, an external, like one of the small T5s or something like that, it's a game changer. So I've had the Hyperdeck 8K for a while now, and I've been plugging in a LSC spinning disk and recording to that for hours. And it's so cool to pick up the files on a 10G network. So the high-end Hyperdeck will do the 10G, which is super fast. So it's like having a server. It's turning a Hyperdeck into a server that's on your network that you type in that IP address, or I would use CyberDuck, and I would put, because it's FTP, so I would use CyberDuck, just put that icon on the desktop and suck those files down. And as for the Micro Four Thirds, would I confuse your kids? Because here's a in focus. This is a Micro Four Thirds camera with a prime lens. This is a 24mm Micro Four Thirds cinema lens.
Yeah,
would I get them?
I just noticed them talking about it one morning, and this is years ago when they were much younger, like when they were 6 and 7 years old, and they were immediately identifying, oh, that's news, that's a blog. And I was asking why, and they said, well, the background's softer. This is like they're 6 or 7 years old. And it just created a thought process for me. And then I got into using Super 35s, and even at Super 35s, I get a little like, oh, I wish I had less depth of field, but you get used to looking at Super 35 all the time, and everything else just seems like it's really, like you're just not getting and like if you're building I built a lot of studios, and the studios feel much bigger when you build Super 35, because it's basically like doubling the size of the apparent size of the studio, because because everything is in so much shorter depth of field. And so it's just a cheap way to do that. Now, as soon as you go over 75 feet, you can't focus anymore. And I wouldn't use them for sports, so I'd still go back to 2/3 for sports, because I need the depth of field, and I'm going on really long lenses. But for the kind of stuff that I do so much of, we kind of consider that even Super 35 sometimes can be a little bit limiting from our perspective. As far as the Blackmagic announcements, I'm in a rush now to buy the old Hyperdecks, because they have one thing that the new ones don't, and that's analog in. The analog inputs in the Pro are like central to how we manage audio, to all of our ISOs and programs, and because everything's going through a mixer and then coming back to it. And without that, it means I have to have embedders and de-embedders, and that would be a disaster. So I'm going to get old ones, and I don't. Maybe I'll use the new ones, but I don't know how I will do that. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so the thing about analog, that only went on their top model. So it was the top model, the $1,400, $1,500 model that had analog in. Then it moved to the 8K. The 8K the 8K is currently the top model, and it's the one that has analog in now.
Yeah, but I think it only has 2 analogs in. It doesn't have one for every. So if I want to record HD, I could record 4 channels, but I could only put the 2 channels. Like right now, what I can do is, if I'm doing HD or 4K, I can record different channels of audio. And this is like how we back up, how we manage ISOs, because remember, everything for us goes out of the system is immediately split. The audio immediately goes one direction, the video goes another, and then they're all married back together. And what we have is a bunch of Dante ordinates, little pigtails on in and out of all of those Hyperdecks. So we have Dante all the way up until it goes right into the Hyperdecks. Now, if they suddenly supported Dante, it'd be a different thing. So for me, there's actually nothing. Yesterday, it's the first Blackmagic announcement in probably 5 years that there was nothing that I needed from what I saw. So it was the least expensive Blackmagic announcement ever for me. I think that they're great designs, and I think people will like them. I think that the lack of, because it's a huge problem for us for our little Hyperdecks, the minis, is that we have to embed and de-embed audio is like a thing. It's why we don't use them for a bunch of stuff. And so anyway, so that's my problem with that. I'm kind of interested in the Web Presenter 4K. I think it could be something we'll probably get one and test it. Next question.
I apologize for being in the middle of trash pickup time. Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. is up next. And Greg says, with all the airtime on After Hours channel, might it be possible someone could schedule time and present a relevant program of their own? Lots of open airtime where some real content could be programmed, thinking back to the early CNN, ESPN days here.
Go ahead, Liam.
There is a channel on Discord called Suggestions in the After Hours group. It hasn't been used as yet. We also have After Hours alert and discussions. So last night I put up the link for the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum when that went live. I also put up the one for AV Tech Talks, so that people, to me, we've already got other things which happen around different hours, which I think are of potentially interest for other people to see other things. So I don't want to be, stepping on other audiences. So that's my thought. But I do think it would be really good to definitely take long form items, something like we were talking this morning, Alex was talking about, Alex Gollner, about animating the office hours logo. It would be really great to be able to sit there and watch him do that and see how he did it or didn't, that sort of thing, or the infamous JJ and the cable making.
Yeah, JJ, literally while JJ making SDI cables on a Sunday afternoon for the office hours system, he streamed it or put it on. Was just sitting here with us answering questions, and so it was good. Go ahead, Chris.
I'll just say there's been a lot of casual conversation about developing my new show called The Third Rail.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I just think it's a good incubator that you can come in and try things out. And then if it becomes something, then you go ahead and start your own show on another channel somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and I think that right now I'm pretty, I want to keep it pretty casual. Like I don't want it to become, what I'm afraid of is that all of after hours will become programmed, and then it becomes its own thing. And I'm trying to avoid that, because the concept of, for me, at least for after hours, is the idea of a really good open office system, which is that it has all the advantages of open office. We can just sit there and ask questions, and talk about things and maybe work on something for a couple hours. But we can also turn it. This is the part you can't do with office hours. I mean, with open offices, you can't turn it off. Like you can just say, I'm no longer here. And you're just like, you're transported away. And so it has all the advantages of open office without all the disadvantages of open office, in my opinion. And so so what I want to do is I'm getting ready to put up an iPad that is just sitting here that will most likely be connected to office hours, to after hours all the time. And then I can just turn it on when I want, if I feel like hanging out with everybody, and if I'm not working on something that I have to think about, which is very rare, but the, if I'm working on something like that, I can leave it open and listen to it, or I can interact with it, or something catches my ear, I can jump in. So my plan is to kind of do that. And that's the kind of goal I have now. I think that there is a model in which the office hours channel could add more programming. So if there's interest in that, I mean, we have a couple limits to what we can do there, but the idea is that that would probably end up being 2 channels. One that is just programmed content, which I think could be 24/7, eventually multiple 24/7s. You could imagine when we got to a certain size that you might just want audio or just want video or something like that, if there was so many that wouldn't fit into one thing. I think that I'm a little careful to say that, because I think that one of the powers of office hours is the heterogeneous mix of people. The people are coming from all different backgrounds and all interacting with each other. So the having it start to create individual verticals would be something I'm a little concerned about. Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, one of the other things that we've done quite a bit of is doing mic checks or sorting out people's tech that takes a bit longer, particularly the first time for everybody. Or a good example really was with Josh, who I think we spent a couple of hours at least trying to different options, the sort of thing that you can't really do in the pre-show, because if you did, you'd feel like you were hogging too much of the pre-show.
And I think that's the power of it. It's like whatever's happening is happening. I mean, this morning, yet again, Todd Reynolds came up and played us an amazing piece of music, just like something he's working on. It was unbelievable. And hopefully we'll encourage Victor to come in and do the same thing, and other musicians. But that can be part of what we're doing. But I want it to remain casual, and we need to move on. I'm sorry. We're going to keep going because we got a lot of questions. Next question.
TJ Asher is up next from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and here on the panel almost every day. And he says, in the Facebook earnings call yesterday, they said 50% of their deliverable is now video. We hear from Alex that Facebook video has very low view times in general. How can we reconcile these two statements? How are they measuring video deliverable?
Facebook Live has very low video. Facebook overall is very successful at delivering video. So that's how you reconcile that. I'm just saying that, and a lot of people still do Facebook Lives. I'm just saying that they're not very effective on Facebook. You'll get a lot of what you think. We just want to always never mistake movement for progress, and in the sense of this is that the stat that everyone looks at is reach, on Facebook, which is meaningless. What you should be looking for is average view time. How long did they watch? And if you get over a minute on Facebook, you are knocking it out of the park. Go ahead, Rupert.
I just also know that this is probably something they're trying to change the landscape on. I know a couple of weeks ago there was a story about them putting $1 billion aside to invest in new creators and bringing content creators to the platform.
Well, there's a difference between content creators and live. You know, like they are investing heavily in live. The problem is the overall infrastructure of how they work makes it very hard. They're literally pushing against their own model. You know, and so that's the problem that Facebook's always going to have in that area. But they may put $1 billion into creators, and they're making lots of videos, and people are watching those videos on Facebook. I mean, that's a totally valid thing. I just don't know if the live is as valid. You know, again, I think people are using it, but I think that when I talk to creators, the best free one is YouTube. To put it on, because that's going to be your highest average view time. Go ahead, Leland.
Yeah, some of the proof in that was evident when they first brought out Facebook Live and they were paying influencers to come out and broadcast. They realized the minute they stopped paying them, a lot of that traffic generation disappeared as well, because of the fact that they weren't getting the traffic they wanted. They weren't going to stick around if they weren't getting paid, because it was actually an offset to what they were doing on YouTube. It wasn't making any sense to them. Well,
and it was the algorithm changed dramatically. In 2017, April 2017, I can tell you exactly, because that was the beginning at the end of my last company. So, but suddenly we just saw numbers drop because they changed the way the viral nature of Facebook worked. So instead of going out to a large percentage of your followers, it went to a very small percentage. They did it overnight, and a lot of people lost their jobs. Because they had money on, they had gotten budgets on numbers that they had the year before that they couldn't achieve the next year, and it was a bloodbath. And that's how a lot of people left. So go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, make no mistake, Facebook has your number. The algorithm is very, very, very well designed, and it'll suck you in. I mean, their job is to suck you in and serve you up ads. So they're going to play the best videos if they can that'll attract your attention. They know your demographic. Right. In some of our tests that we've done when we did some YouTube lives, we had an influencer that had over 1 million people on Facebook, and we would sporadically pump in the signal. And I mean, you're not supposed to do both at the same time, but we would do quick hits and throw some overlays in there to make the signals different. But what we found, the long-term viewing was on YouTube was spectacular. Like the difference was just bar none. I mean, it was like 11,000 on YouTube versus like a couple hundred, and she had over 1 million on YouTube and on Facebook. So the results spoke for themselves.
The average view time on YouTube typically is 10 to 12 times Facebook. It's not 50% more. It's not 30% more. It's 10 to 12 times as much as Facebook. And that's, if you're going to build a real relationship with your viewers, that's important. We're going to keep moving because we are just getting crushed with questions. Next question.
Rachel Ann Clifton is up next with, can the panel give us an 101 primer on HDMI cable? Thank you.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I'll do this quickly. So essentially, these are the types, these are the specifics for HDMI. So with HDMI, rather than going through all of them and explain, I'll just put up the graph quickly so people can see.
Yep. Oh, we lost you, Carol. You muted.
Essentially, what I want to look at is probably the last two columns. So 2.0 allows you to do 4K at 60. And it also supports ARC. But it can support eARC, but that's up to the manufacturer. It's not in the format. 2.1 will support 4K 120. It has support for eARC. We'll get to eARC in a second, and it supports 8K as well, 8K up to 60. The 1.4 supports 4K at 30. So now I'll go to another slide. So here, this is eARC. So this is the audio side of HDMI. So essentially all we're looking at here is pretty basic. So the final column is eARC, which supports Atmos. If you have ARC, what it does, it takes Atmos and puts it down to 5.1. So it does that in the chipset. So just to let you know, if you don't have eARC in your television or in your receiver, it's not a problem. It will just take the Atmos and put it down to 5.1 because your system is most likely just 5.1 anyway.
There you go. You were going to say something, Nigel? No. Next question.
Vienna in Australia says, to those who will be meeting up in Seattle, will you be making a time to join after hours or the main show as a group? I'm imagining the AV logistics here.
Is any of our representatives from Seattle that are meeting? When is that? Is that tomorrow? Oh, we don't know. Okay. No, well, yeah, go ahead, Guy. Can't hear you.
Yeah, Sky arranged something on Saturday.
What time?
I'll show up. I think it's at 1 o'clock. I'll have to double check my calendar, but I had to move some stuff around, and I'll be there. And I think Ken is going to be there, and somebody else. But yeah,
well, I'm hoping that you guys will jump on off after hours and say hi to everybody, at least for a little bit, little after hours moment.
For sure.
Excellent.
Just to clarify, that's Ken Jones. Not me.
Ken Jordan is not flying out for it.
You're not flying to Seattle, Ken?
If it was a little longer, I think Ken would. All right, next question.
Dave Chalmers is up next, and Dave says, oops, why did I hit that? That not move. Okay, there we go. In Glasgow, Scotland, did Blackmagic Design make the right choice with sticking with micro 4/3 lens mounts on the new studio cameras?
Go ahead, Stuart.
To grab the customers who already have those lenses and had the previous generation of the camera, absolutely. But again, as I said earlier, they will have conversation with Panasonic, and there's now an opportunity for somebody to come up with a baby box lens for that particular camera.
Mm-hmm. You go ahead, Carl.
So if you take out electronic zoom, then you can just adapt to B4. You can bring back in electronic zoom. So in all the marketing information for the previous camera that this replaces, they only had B4 lenses on there. They had Hiroshi's on the previous cameras. So you just put the adapter on there because the sensor is small. The B4 lenses will cover it, especially with the Blackmagic adapter, which has an active adapter, which enlarges a bit. But the bigger problem is more got to do with the fact that this won't be able to fit any Sony lenses. And I think that's a little bit of a problem because there are some people who currently have photography cameras from Sony that this camera could be really well suited to. Unfortunately, the E-mount has a shallower flange than micro 4/3. So that's the only thing I can think of where the E-mount won't fit. But this lens is this lens mount is actually quite good. And this is why they've always stuck with it, because if it's PL and if it's B4. So for pros, they just go to that.
And I want to say that I think they did the right thing. I mean, just because I'm not using it doesn't mean that it's not the right solution. So I have a very specific look and everything else that we try to achieve. But I think that leaving it at 4/3 with the current lenses, people expend a lot of money on lenses, and changing that entire process would be difficult for the people who may be upgrading from this to something else. Next question.
Comes from a guy who's been in the question queue a couple of times in the past. Alex L. from Nevada, California. How do you see the usage graphs for Zoom Meet?
I was going to ask this I was going to ask Rupert before the show, and I was like, you know what? I'll just wait during the show and let him show me, because you talk about it and you show these cool graphs, and I'm like, I can't find the same graphs that Rupert shows. Go ahead, Rupert.
So yeah, this is in the back end of Zoom on the web console. I've got some set up tabs here. So I'm hopefully not going to show anything, but this is my back end account. And it's this tab here, or this section here, dashboard under admin. And if you go into there, you'll get something that looks a bit like this. And it looks very different to the normal sort of web interface.
I've seen that, but it's where I see the graphs of like.
Yep. So you go into a meeting, or and you'll then see your participants, and then you can drill down into the participants. And I'm not going to show you that part, but once you've drilled down and get to a participant, this is what you see. You get the 4 tabs here: audio, video, screen sharing, CPU, and you can see the performance throughout the duration of a meeting, and it gives you all these stats there's all time stamped and all that stuff. And then at the top you can do webinars as well. That comes up separately. And if you have room connectors, you can do those separately also. And then you can set overall thresholds. This is in the meeting quality settings tab. You can set this to have a threshold or have a overall score, and then you can set up alerts.
So I guess what I'm seeing is I click on one of those and I see the list of everybody. What I don't see is the graph.
Okay, so the list, you should be able to click on
go back to dashboard.
So this is dashboard. I can click on these meetings here, and that would give me a list of participants.
Yeah. Where are you clicking to get the graph again?
So you go into the users. Let me just fade out of this so I can click around a bit more freely. So if I go into meetings, and then I would click.
We won't make everybody watch too long, but I'm obsessed with this, and I was like, I don't understand where it is.
Yep. So when I go into meetings, if I click on a meeting, I then get the participants, and the participant name is clickable links. Are clickable links. Go into a participant, and then scroll down, and then I see.
Oh, so you're looking at a specific participant. I'm trying to look for a graph that looks like that is showing me like the number of people in the meeting. I was looking for a general graph of data.
Okay, it may be in there. I'll click around and get back to you.
All right. We'll do it in after hours. I thought I didn't know if it was something quick. I realized I found that part, but what I didn't find was what I'm looking for are those beautiful graphs, but showing me like number of people that are, like you would see in YouTube of like, and I think that would be super useful. Go ahead, David.
The top level dashboard in button on the menu shows you something more akin to nuts. Hold on.
It shows me a lot of meetings and usage and everything else. What I don't see is like for this meeting, what are the number of concurrent, what are the number of participants and what is it over time? And I don't know if that's even available. So now be super useful.
After hours.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Next question.
We're in Dave Chalmers land now from Glasgow, Scotland. And he says, is 10 gig Ethernet really a viable alternative to fiber, copper, HDSDI for field use? And he's interested in that because of the Blackmagic Studio camera announcements.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, I'm going to set the Wayback Machine to when I was an employee of Global Television, which is now owned by NEP Worldwide. Making a HDSDI cable of, say, 100 meters length, which, by the way, you terminate each end in about 45 seconds with a $15 connector. The drum of HDSDI cable is 301 meters long, and at the time they were close to $3,000 Australian. Okay, fiber and triax, you can basically triple the price of that drum of cable for a drum of triax and triple it again for a drum of fiber of 100 meters. The plugs on the end of the fiber, you do not want to know the price of because they are very, very expensive. To be able to swap to 10 gig Ethernet cable that you can pay $50 Australian for maybe 25, 30 meters, for anybody doing low budget production, that is an absolute game changer just by itself, to not have to spend that money. And to be able to go out to places where people will trip over cables or will run a forklift over a cable. Trust me, repairing a fiber optic cable is an expensive procedure, but it has to be done because of the cost of the cables. You just throw out the Ethernet cable and buy another one. The amount of money this changes is amazing.
Carl.
So this is the game changer. So just put Cat 6A everywhere you have it. So this is an enormous game changer for houses of worship, for places that have fixed installation and fixed locations for cameras where they can just run this in the walls, have an output, they can plug their camera directly. It's power, video, comms, tally, everything in one cable, and the cable is dirt cheap and available at the corner store. Massive game changer. This is massive.
Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
And a quick plug for After Hours. We showed how to terminate Cat 6A a couple of weeks ago using the pass-throughs. And we'll do it again if there's need so that people can see how to use the new pass-through connectors, which reduces the complexity and increases the reliability massively.
I mean, the main thing we always have to look at is that, if you think about the pyramid of production, of all the different productions going on, when we think about who needs triax, it is this part of the production pyramid, right? Like that, there is a need for triax, but it's that little tip. What Blackmagic is, and maybe a little bit lower, is a bunch of other things. This is Blackmagic's world that they're going after, and so they're not that interested in this part, and neither is a lot. The companies that pay attention to that and they get very excited about it, that this is the ultimate whatever. It's very lucrative, it's high margin, and there's very few people, and this part is getting smaller, not bigger. Go ahead, Ray.
Very quickly, Seattle Get Together will be available on After Hours 1 to 4 tomorrow.
Great. Next question.
Dave Chalmers is back with have to ask about telephoto lens suggestions for the Micro Four Thirds Power Zoom Power Focus for Blackmagic Design Studio cameras.
Go ahead, Carl.
So there is one currently being made. So it's a 350 millimeter equivalent to full frame. This will be pretty good I think for a lot of situations. You just need a bit of light, or go to the, because it's dual ISO. So go to the plus 18 dB in the ISO if you're indoors, because you'll get very low noise. I think the dual ISO is going to be really good for these kind of lenses that are in the 5.6 range.
And I have that lens and it's okay. Like, it's not the best glass in the world, but it works. Go ahead, Stuart.
The question actually needs a question asked before it. And don't worry about finding a telephoto lens and what have you. Find an adapter that will go micro four thirds to your glass that will pass through lens control first. If that's not available, you're running the lens manual. And remember, some lenses default to iris open, such as Canon's. Some lenses like Pentax default to iris closed when there's no power. So you're going to be limited as what you can use.
But you
so
could
find that adapter first.
And you definitely could do a really solid shoot with just those 45 to 175s. If you put two of those or three of those cameras on it, and you had one wide that isn't controllable, which would be very similar to a process that we would use, you'd be able to get close-ups and everything else. It would work pretty well. It's not the fastest glass, so you just end up with you got to make sure you have enough light in the location. Next question.
Gordon Lake, Los Angeles, California. Is it being too much of a fanboy to believe that Blackmagic is selling a zoom control for micro four thirds lenses because it knows that a kit of such lenses will be available soon?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so they know where the market is moving. They've spoken to lens manufacturers and are asking, hey, look, if we build it, will you come? And I think it's if you build it, they will come. And I think that's what's happening here.
I think that they're starting to, and we've been talking about this for the last year and a half, that Blackmagic's in the process of building its own weather system. It's selling so many switchers and so many cameras that people are now, it's now a valid market to start building towards. It's not just, it works for them and somebody else. It doesn't need to work for anybody else. And that's how big that market is becoming. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
And just remember that there are lens rental places, one of which is named that way, but a lot of them that do kits, and you can get a kit of 7 or 8 primes or zoom, 2 or 3 zooms.
Well, but the problem is that none of those, there's only one lens that is sold right now that does.
I know, but what I'm saying is if somebody develops for this, even if they develop really good glass, you should be able to get it in that aftermarket rental, bring it in for a show for 3 days, and then send it back at a really nominal cost.
Yep. Next question.
John Barker of Malmö, Sweden is next. And he says, what does the panel think about the new HyperDeck models? Anything missing from them specifically?
Go ahead, Carl.
I think a great thing they added was the webcam out. So now you can actually use it as a non-switching ATEM. If that's the only thing you've got in your arsenal, you can plug your HDMI camera into it and then, USB webcam out.
Yep. Go ahead, John.
Two good things about the new I just bought a HyperDeck 3 weeks ago. I'm going to see if I can return it. The HyperDeck Studio Pro that I have here is the noisiest thing in my rack, and the new one's supposed to be quieter. So I'm looking forward to testing it out.
For me, the deal breaker is that I need XLR ins. So I'm going to have to buy a couple right now, soon, to make sure before the channel empties, because I need those in my system. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, and here on the panel, why couldn't Elgato have done a better job with the new Elgato Facecam? Did they miss a golden opportunity?
I have it. I tested it in the process of putting it back in the box. So, yeah, they missed an opportunity. The chip is, it's a cheap chip, and it's not a good, and the lens is too wide. Go ahead, Leland.
Well, just one thing I've watched with Elgato over the years, which obviously they produce fantastic equipment. I just think right now they're spreading themselves a little thin in the market, trying to capture all of these live streaming avenues down to one lane. And it puts you in a market that's kind of, well, we got to let go of something here in order to make it work over here. And I think they did that on this camera. They could have done a lot better.
Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
The only thing I'd say is that for the average people that I know it's 1080p, and I know that's the issue, is that it's not a 4K camera, but they're already going to introduce people and move them, step them up to somewhere. And maybe they've got a 4K version coming out. Maybe they can get the chips for it.
My complaint isn't that it's 1080p. It's that it's 1080p at 199. At 199, they're competing directly with a Brio. Now that's their fundamental problem, is their pricing. Because I can buy a stream cam, which is the Logitech version of what the Facecam is. The stream cam is Logitech's version of this, and it is $50 less, and a smaller package than this one. And so there's a better camera that does the same thing at $50 less. The one upside of the Facecam is that the software is way better than everybody else's. But that's the software is better, but that's it. And that's not enough. And again, someone needs to build a 55 to 60 degree FOV camera. Like, that's what we need for this. Like, what we're doing here and what people need for Zoom is 55 degrees, not 70, not 80, not 90 degrees that you can zoom in on, but 55 degrees. 60 degrees that you can, 4K would sell, 60 degrees at 4K at $199 would sell as many as they could make. Like literally, like it would revolutionize what everybody's doing. And it's a combination of the lens and the chip resolution would just turn the whole thing on fire. But you know, people keep on thinking they're shooting into offices, and people don't want to show everything behind them at home. They just want to have them, you know, and that's what people aren't getting. Next question.
Jim Hankins is up next from here in the panel in Chesterfield, Michigan. I'm trying to use Companion on one Mac with ZoomISO OSC on another. I'm having errors with the ZoomOSC plugin. Works with generic OSC. Any ideas?
We don't have Andy. If you're somewhere nearby, we need to pull the Andy Carluccio tag and put up the big thing in the sky. Go ahead, David.
The struggle I've always had is just getting the target IP of the downstream target that you're trying to hit matching, and the listening ports back up. We could chat in after hours if you're around. That's pretty much all I got.
Rupert.
When I have one application that's working and one that's not on the same machine over the network, I would just look at firewall exceptions maybe on your local machine.
Next question.
Deanna in Australia says, I've just discovered the visualizer in Apple Music. Cool for you. Does anyone have any user tips, including how to customize it?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Learn to code. I don't think there are any user controls on Visualizer, although the first time you use it, it's pretty mesmerizing.
It's shiny. Go ahead, Carl.
So yeah, you can go into full manual mode, just hit question mark. It'll bring up the menu on the top left and give you all the controls to go into manual mode.
Next question.
I didn't know that. That's cool. Douglas Carmichael's up next with Wave recently released CLA Nx. They've got a link there, which simulates Chris Lord Alge's control room response and monitors. Could the room monitor simulation help when mixing for broadcast or streaming on headphones in a poor room?
I'm not a big fan of simulation. I feel like you're now, like if you're really trying to do something for actual broadcast, I think that simulating something is going to make it actually harder, because you're now, any kind of error in that simulation is going to be propagated through the system. Go ahead, Bill.
Identifying and dealing with room nodes for each space I go into is always one of the first things I do. They're always different. So whatever you're going to put on in terms of filtering or boosting, it's got to be related to what your room is doing actively to your sound bouncing around. And that's customized individual one per one. I don't think a preset will ever do that.
I've never worked in a studio where they fixed a problem with a simulator. They know what the limits of that room are. You know, this room is too small. It's not the right shape. It's whatever it is. They know what the limits of the room are, but they don't try to fix it with a simulation. At least I haven't been in one. Next, let's go to the next question. We're now
okay. Graham, whoops, way off the screen. Graham Cardwell from Belfast, Northern Ireland. In a recent after hours, we were showing old gear, and I found an old miniDV camcorder. Pictures seemed quite good on a laptop, so thinking of using it as a webcam. From miniDV to Thunderbolt on my MacBook Pro is a simple cable link, if it exists, enough, or is it more complex than that?
Roscoe.
Don't go there unless it has an HDMI out, but don't go there.
Go ahead, Carl.
If it's HDV, then I'd say yes. If it's miniDV, then I'd say no.
It's still not going to compete with just a standard, you know, like webcam at this point. Go ahead, Stuart.
Optically, unless it looks like this, the answer is no. Trust me, unless you've got something like that sort of HDV camera or DV camera, just no.
Yeah.
No.
Bill, real quick. Can't hear you, Bill.
There are FireWire devices like the Blackmagic video recorder that will take a FireWire out of those old cameras, turn it into a digital signal in USB. You can bring it into a Mac and use it. They're not the greatest solution, but it does exist if you want to play with it.
Just play with it, but don't go down that path. Next question.
David Brady, New York, says Atem Extreme ISO software control was unable to connect in mid-gig yesterday. The device was responding to ping and hardware buttons still worked. Are there any easy recovery methods beyond rebooting?
Rebooting is the way to do that. That's how you bring something back up. The only time I have my ISO freeze up is, it doesn't freeze. It just goes into a, can't talk to Zoom. And that is a full reboot, which is unplugging the USB-C and the power. Go ahead, George, real quick.
So real quick, take out the network cable also and let it repatch, because I had that issue this morning when I came on. Just unplug and take out the network cable also.
Yep. Next question.
Our friend Jonas Totel of Reutlingen, Germany says, do you guys think of what do you guys think of build in public? Does it make sense, or should one better build in office hours or even build in private?
I would probably build in office hours or after hours than I would in public. I think that's a much more controlled environment. So that's I think that there's a real power to doing that. I mean, you've watched us kind of develop Mukana and so on and so forth, kind of while we're working, but I probably wouldn't do it quite as publicly. It's just a lot of people out there. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida says, has anyone seen the Zoom app Sesh, SESH, and it's got a link there, to keep speakers in time and audience response? Any thoughts about it?
Haven't seen it yet. Has anyone used it? No? Yeah, go ahead, John.
I reviewed it, and I'm just worried about how good its delineation of the different speakers are, because even with captions on, it doesn't do a good job defining the speakers. So I'm questionable on their analytics.
What does it do?
It tells you who's speaking, and if they're speaking a lot, if they're speaking over a certain amount, but it will tell you the length of time that they've spoken a session.
Okay. All right. I'm sure that's important somewhere. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of this new group of Zoom apps, and it is sort of fun. It keeps track of who's speaking, how much you're speaking. They also have some templates about different types of calls, whether it's a planning meeting, it's a scrum. It should be fun. They do recommend headsets, John, I think, and that's to prevent it from being confused who's speaking.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up. A friend of mine, Maddie, is having trouble accessing Mukana on her iPhone. She is watching the show right now. I've shown her the basic information, but can everyone explain how office hours came about and share a bit about yourselves?
I don't know if I can. We're going to kick that question back to you and have you bring that one up. I'd love to talk about that one. But we don't have enough time to talk about it right now. So I moved it out. I didn't delete it. I just moved it back to you, Douglas, but bring that one up again. It's a good question, just not at this time of the hour. Next question.
That way she has to come back and we get a second viewer. So great. The next one comes from George Kennedy Jr. in Washington, D.C. How important and why did Blackmagic choose to add a separate SDI monitor out for data overlay to most of the higher end Hyperdecks?
Go ahead, Carl.
One of the reasons where it's really good to use this is if you've got your Hyperdeck going into a switcher and you only get to see the program out, or you actually see it in the switcher, you may want to know what the actual Hyperdeck is giving out. So you may want a little, 15-inch monitor above the Hyperdeck to show you what that Hyperdeck is actually giving versus what graphics are being overlaid, in other things in the switcher, to go, is that coming from my Hyperdeck, or is that something that's been put in by an ME in the switcher? And it's just a confirmation for some professionals who can just look rather than having to dig down and find out.
Go ahead, George.
And a quick use case for this is, I think, with the web presenters also, is having a bunch of these going into a multi-view 4-in, 4-out, and having it on one monitor so you could see a 4-up, and then you could just punch buttons and see them individually if need be.
Yeah, that's good. Absolutely. Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas, up next. When streaming for recording a Zoom meeting via screen-scape, how should the Zoom participant notification principles best be honored? Equivalent to what Zoom would normally do if the inbuilt features were being used.
I think in general, you could announce it. I mean, obviously in ours, we assume, if you're in here, we assume that you are, we assume that you assume that you're being streamed because we talk about it. I think that if you're in a meeting and streaming it, you do need to announce it, but I think that generally you just need to state it. Leland, real quick.
That's all I was going to confirm with Alex, is the fact that we normally vocally announce before a stream and let them know. Sometimes we ask, is it okay if we record you at this time? Because sometimes they may not want to be recorded and are just there for a tech check or something. So make sure you invite that question in first.
Next question.
Ernest Floyd's up next from Bastrop, Louisiana. I need a phone hood or sunshade for shooting with my iPhone 12 Pro Max. Any recommendation?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yep, certainly do. So here we go. So this is it. It's pretty good. It clips on, so you can move to any lens you want. You can push it up against glass, so you don't get reflections. You know, so when you're shooting outside of a window, you don't want your phone showing from the glass. It's just a pretty good solution. Good price. It's rubber. You can squish it down. It's just perfect for a lot of things. Very cheap.
So I have an obsession that when I'm flying, I always try to take pictures out the side of out the side of my window. I actually get my seats so that I don't have the wing in the shot. Like I try to set up seats so I don't have the wing in the shot, so that I can get these like landing. And I don't know why I do it. It's like a pastime that I've been doing since I had big cameras before iPhones, and I've been like, somebody needs to build something you can push right up to the glass so I don't get reflections. There it is. Oh my. All right. We're gonna have to move pretty quickly. Bill and then Stuart real quick.
I took that to mean the other way around. Like he wanted to be able to see on his phone screen what he's shooting.
But we got a great answer.
We got an answer, but that's for the lens. I'm talking about for the actual screen. The problem is most of that's touch screen. So any kind of a hood on the front of your monitor is going to preclude you from being able to use it other than just the button on the side for taking snaps.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Small Rig and the other similar manufacturers actually make a handheld like grip for using the phones, and some of them have a sun shield available. Carl, that same lens hood would probably work on a GoPro and get rid of the sun for the same thing.
Go ahead, David.
I love it. I love it.
I just wanted to add that I could see my apartment from that screenshot in Carl's presentation.
All right, next question.
David Brady of New York is next. He says, Loopback and Potato. Are there any virtual methods to patch audio between Mac and PC platforms that won't break the bank?
Dante? Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, VB audio cable on the PC, and then route it over NDI audio or Dante and patch it on over.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, Dante Via, designed for that.
It's
not very good, but it's designed for it.
The one piece of hardware, like an Audinate, like the little 2-channel somewhere in the network, will tighten up the clocking and then allow then you're just doing DVS, So that makes it easier. Is that right? DVS, Dante Video Virtual Sound Card. Yeah, DVS. Next question.
Dave Chalmers, Glasgow, Scotland. Is anyone else upset not to see a viewfinder hinge on the new Blackmagic Studio camera? Not all shots are at shoulder level.
Go ahead, Stuart, and then Carl.
Okay, these cameras are designed to be used on a tripod with controls. If you're in a studio environment and you're tilting down and tilting up, if you're tilting more beyond 15 degrees, you're using the wrong rig.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it doesn't really need to tilt because of that.
Go ahead, Carl.
So the Blackmagic ISO Studio viewfinder that does tilt is $1,795. The new camera, the Pro version, is $1,795. You can either buy a viewfinder that tilts or buy an entire camera for the same price. Your choice.
Yeah, exactly. It's a viewfinder that has a lens on it. All right, next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. While browsing for 4G hotspot external antennas, I counted the brand Proxicast, Prxicast. They seem to make antennas, mobile routers, and power management at what they call professional grade, and that's in quotes. Any experiences with this equipment?
Proxicast? I have not worked with it. Anyone? Nope, you stumped us. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back in. This time, Douglas says, if you are building a portable rack with a professional grade Ethernet switch, a Cisco Catalyst 9300 or something like that, along with other components, would you use a Cat6 patch panel to relieve the strain on switch ports from constant plugging and unplugging?
Go ahead, Rupert.
You can do. Obviously, you're introducing another point of failure in terms of your connections there. But if you do that, you want to keep your numbering 1-to-1 so you can see exactly what ports are what. Any unused ports on your switch, you also, if you're in a mobile situation, you want to get some little dummy plugs to keep the dust and the crud out of there. And but if you are not doing that, what your strain relief should be good cable management and some safety loops in your cables before they go along their run.
and I'm a big fan of convenience panels. You know, is usually because for me, patch panels are something that I'm actually rerouting my video or rerouting audio. So when you say patch panels, I will call those patch panels. When you say I want to go through, I'll tend to call those convenience panels because they're convenient because they come out to the back of our racks and so on and so forth. I'm a huge fan of those, especially when we're on site, because I don't want people plugging and unplugging all the time into our equipment. It shortens the lifespan of your equipment. So having hard IO for everything, if you can, to the back of a panel where you have cheap throughs, relatively cheap throughs, and you're not digging into your hardware all the time, is a much more sane way to live. So in my opinion. John, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to say, most of the time we put our switches on the back of the racks because most of the connections are on the back, and just very few coming out the front end.
Yeah, I have to admit that I don't use the throughs as much with Ethernet. We definitely have done it, but we don't use it as much as we do it with all the other stuff because our switches aren't as expensive. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up, and he says, I was reading an article about how astronauts on the International Space Station are watching feeds from the Tokyo Olympics. Would there be a specific encoding workflow needed?
This is no good, Carl.
So yeah, so there's a system that NASA uses called SCAN, so space communication and navigation. This is the network that got set up. I'm sure Alex has probably done a Google Hangout where he's pumped into this, and then NASA's pumped it up to them. But this is a system they've had in place since around 2001.
It's a 2-second delay. So that you'll notice anytime you see the astronauts nodding, they're nodding because they're waiting for the signal to get to them. And so it'll depend on where they are in their orbit as to what they're capable of. So there's probably windows that they're watching the Olympics in, probably not all the time, because they're basically bouncing. When we've done interactions with the space station, they have been through Houston. So then we have a specific window. And so the way that works is there's a satellite connection two-way to Houston. And then Houston can either bounce it off another satellite. That's how they go to broadcast. Or if you're in the right connections, you can get a hold of Houston signal over fiber from their DC hub. Go ahead, Rupert.
Just I saw in the news, I think today or yesterday, the space station got knocked out of position for a short time.
So they had their own Olympics. They had their own stress. Next question. Nope,
Performance is everything up there. Douglas Carmichael, boosting Maddie's question. This must be a second one from her. How are movies animated? The pretty big question. I'm new here and don't that's all right. You're welcome here. Please come back.
Ask another. I'm sorry that one didn't get as much traction today. There's a lot of questions, but bring that up again. We'll talk a little bit more about it. We're on the last 2 minutes here. Next question.
Stan Shannon Roseville says, "What's your favorite or preferred WordPress hosting service?"
Ken. Just threw the ball. He didn't even have to turn around.
There are so many hosting services for WordPress.
No pressure, but you only got about 10 seconds.
Yeah. Contact me on Discord because it's all dependent on where you are and who you're trying to reach, and I'll give you a direct answer for that.
Yep. Go ahead, John.
If you want speed and cost, it's WPX hosting, WPX.com. They're the fastest on the planet.
Go ahead, Leland, real quick.
They'll make you pay for your email, though. I've been using Namecheap for several years with no problems whatsoever. I host several websites out there for 10 years.
Go ahead, Leo.
And you're better off using something like Stratic, which is a flat site thing that sits on the front. It will make your site both much secure and twice as fast as any of the hosting companies. Stratic.
Next question.
And the final one this morning from Sky Gleason in Seattle. Is it okay to share on After Hours tomorrow the Pacific Northwest chapter of Office Hours hybrid barbecue between 1 and 4 p.m. Pacific time?
Go ahead, Leo.
No, you'll have to ask Carmi.
So here's the thing: is that After Hours was built for that. Like that is what After Hours is for, is to have barbecue. What we need to do is see how Sky's does. Sky is our canary in the coal mine, and he's going to go out there and he's our scout, figuring stuff out like Mad in the Kitchen and this. He's out there scouting for us. See what we like and don't like. But what we need to do is do a barbecue that we're doing it everywhere. All of us gather whoever's nearest by, and we have a barbecue, and then we all come into After Hours. And so there's like 300 people in a barbecue, but we're all like tied in somehow with Zoom. That'll be the that's the direction to go. Ray, I'm gonna cut you off here because we're shifting gears. Okay, so we're shifting gears to our second hour, and we have Terri Morgan here. Hi, Terri.
Well, hello.
It's good to have you back.
For having me today.
It's good to have you back. Terri is from LumaTouch and one of the developers. Developing part of the developing team for LumaFusion, and we heard a rumor that you have some new features. Is that true?
We do. We just came out with 3.0. Oh, by the way, I'm here in Seattle, so I don't know where the barbecue is, but I might show up.
Oh yes, we'll make sure Terri, you know where the barbecue is. Okay. So let's work on that. Well, tell us a little bit before we get into the new features. For the folks that are new to LumaFusion, can you explain a little bit about what it is? And Ken, if you can make Terri, I think she's going to want to screen share. So if you can,
I will.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I'll just share my screen. Instead of you looking at me, I can, let's see if I can share. Am I allowed to share?
I think so.
Oh, let's see. It's disabled sharing.
Oh, you should be able to do it now.
Sorry okay, I'll try it again. All right, so I'm gonna do Luma. I'm gonna share this sound, optimize for video, I think, and share. All right, so what you're looking at now is LumaFusion, and I don't know how many people out there have heard of it or have used it. I think a lot of people on the panel have definitely heard of it because I've been here before. But I'd like to describe a little bit about LumaFusion. So it is a professional multi-track editor for iOS, iPad, and iPhone. And it includes the advanced editing tools that you need to create pro-level projects. It has the ability to move to your project to Final Cut. So if you're editing along and you decided you wanted to move to Final Cut, you could certainly do that and then continue editing with the media in Final Cut. And you can do that in two ways. One, you just send the data over and reconnect up the media. So for instance, if you had imported your media from Dropbox, then when you export here, and these little blue touches are my finger. So if you can see the blue touches, you can see I can export to an XML project package. And when I do that, I can choose to just do the data and reconnect up to the media that is either on Dropbox or an external drive or wherever. So you get a really fast transfer over to Final Cut. But and now with Apple supporting an external drive, LumaFusion can edit directly from the external USB-C drive. So there's no copying the media onto your device anymore. I'll just show you where you'd find that. So you'd go into the Files menu here, and you would just add a link to a folder. I don't have my drive connected up right now because my USB-C is connected to the computer. But if it was here, I would see it, and then I would just choose it and say done, and it would connect up to that. And then I'm looking directly at that media. So it's super simple to set up. And then you can just edit as normal. When you're done, you'd export your Final Cut project, reconnect that drive, and be off and going. But although it does have that ability, it in fact gives you enough control and features to finish your projects right from your iOS device. And one of the things I love the most about LumaFusion is what I think is the best editing model I've ever used. And I've edited with a lot of things. And what I like about it is it's a good combination of a traditional track-based timeline. So you have the ability to mute or hide tracks, and you have the ability to insert and overwrite. So if I'm going to turn that way down, if I'm in overwrite mode, I can. Oh, I'm also in multi-selector. I can take a clip and just overwrite things without moving anything else on my timeline. However, if I'm in insert mode and I trim that, you've got the whole ability to keep things in sync and linked up and insert edit. But in addition to the track-based mode, you can see it is a magnetic timeline, but I think one of my favorite things about it is it's more powerful than the traditional magnetic timeline because we've allowed you to unlink clips. So now I've unlinked this highlighted clip, and as I trim, you'll see that that clip isn't going to move. Now I can zoom way in and see this frame by frame and trim frame by frame if I want. So it does give you a lot of power and a lot of control. It also has 6 tracks of 4K video and an additional with audio and an additional 6 tracks of audio. So it really is a storytelling master. I mean, it has color correction, framing and motion tools, audio EQ, speed control, a titler, and now with this 3.0 version, you have stabilization as well. It is not ported over from a desktop thing, so you'll find that the features are very friendly to touch. They're designed specifically for touch, and it's just a joy to use. So I'm really excited to show you. I'll just move on to the new features now, but I'm excited to show you those new features that we have in 3.0. And then if we have time, I'll move to show you what's in the future for LumaFusion, which has to do with multicam. So
yeah,
which is in development. So it's you know, it's raw at the moment, but I'm going to show it anyway. So it's a little sneak peek. So the first feature that I wanted to show you is stabilization. So I'm going to go over here to my things, and I've just made a little edit here. So
and just a quick reminder, if you have questions as Terri is walking us through this, make sure to throw those into Makana. Right,
oh yes, please do, and feel free to interrupt me, Alex. I'm
no,
totally
it's all good. All good. We're watching.
Okay, so here is a clip. I'm just going to play. We just shot this in the woods behind our office, and as you see, it's, you know, we shot it with an iPhone with no gimbal or anything. It's just unstable. So all I have to do is double tap on this clip, and you'll see along the bottom here is we have different editors. The frame and fit editor is here. You have a speed control, and this one here is stabilization. The audio and the color. So this is color and LUTs and different effects, and then audio here. Stabilization is what we're after now. So you'll see that we have lock and load stabilization by Core Melt, which is the same plugin exactly that you can buy to go with Final Cut. And all I have to do is turn it on. So it's going to take it's going to track the motion and make a best guess at what your footage needs. So I can now play it. The analyzation of it is really pretty quick, and you can see that that is now a fairly stable shot. There are different controls in here that you can adjust for the strength of the horizontal, vertical, rotational, and zoom, and also how much scaling you want to do. Because, you know, when you do a stabilization, ultimately you're zooming into the image so that it can be tracked around without getting black edges. So you have control over the things like that. I'm just going to move this clip over under this other little edit I made so you could see the difference between. I'll just make that full screen. So there's the original, and there's the stabilized one that we just did. It's a very great tool for, you know, frankly, some clips are good for stabilization and other things are not. One thing I could say about it is, you know, if you're holding a camera and you're just a little shaky, it's great. But if you're panning around and bumping around, you're going to get the can't remember what it's called now. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. The shutter roll. Yes, shutter roll. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. So, you know, it's a tool you have to play with. Does anybody have any questions about that stabilization?
We have questions stacking up right now. So we're, but let's go ahead, and if you want to show us a couple more things, and then we'll jump into the questions about 8:15.
So for new users, this won't mean much, but for existing users of LumaFusion, you can see now we have the ability to adjust the UI with this little handle. We can get a large timeline if you have a lot of tracks, large preview, so on. And if you want to get back to where you were, you just double tap that little thing. We still have all of the different layouts that you can do as well. So you can choose that and then just change the handle accordingly.
And a reminder for everyone watching, this is all on an iPad. So
yes.
And have you found that it's been a big jump from to the M1? Have you tested on the M1? Is it as far as performance goes?
This is the M1 iPad 12.9 that I'm using, and yeah, it's snappier for sure. Yeah. I don't know if there's much of a difference for export speeds. I think there is supposed to be, but I think what I noticed mostly is just it's faster to load things. And so I talked a little bit about the external drive editing. The next thing I want to show you is a new feature for audio EQ. So this is just a little video I made for my son's school. It's about his nightmares. So I'm going to take this clip. I'll play it now. Let's see. I'm hoping that you can hear this. Can you tell me, Alex?
Go ahead and play.
Can you hear this?
We can.
You can't. Oh darn. What is it I need to do
in the screen share, you probably need to share audio. Make sure you have share audio turned on.
I thought
There's a little
did
button.
that.
And if not, maybe it's not passing through. However, you're getting it in.
You're sharing sound from mic. Oh, hold on. Let me just do this. I think it is the QuickTime that I'm using. Hold on.
Well, now we're hearing you twice.
Okay.
Or us too.
Well, that's not going to work. Okay, so I'll just show you. I'll show you what you would do, and I'll just show you the interfaces, because I obviously not set up right to be able to do this. I need some fancy equipment, I think.
You know, if you came, you can always come here and ask questions. We'd love to have you.
Yeah,
so,
I was thinking of an Atem, but I'm not sure what all I could achieve with that. I'm not a production person. Everything. I'm going to get one.
Everything under the sun. Yeah. So you would definitely be able to do what you're trying to do if you had an Atem. Okay. This would be pretty simple. So
yeah. So we have this. Here's our gain, and you can see that you have audio EQ here. So as I'm not EQ, but keyframing. So as I move through these keyframes, you're going to see the gain is actually moving, and it's super simple to adjust those keyframes. But if we go down here to the graphic equalizer, you'll be able to see, but not here, that we now have an equalizer that you could adjust with this touch interface. And it's actually quite nice. Another thing that you'll be able to see, but not here, is that we now support these third-party AU plugins. So if you buy an AU plugin, a V3 AU plugin from the App Store, you just run it once, and then it's going to show up here, and you can go to this panel.
How do you install the AU plugins in?
Yeah, if you just search for AU V3 plugin or AU plugin in the App Store, you'll find all these different ones. And LumaFusion, there's all sorts of them.
Yep.
There's instrumental ones.
You literally just open up, run it on your iPad, and it loads it in, and then it's available, and then LumaFusion sees it.
Yeah, as long as it's a filter or EQ, like EQ or something, but not an instrumental one. That doesn't really make sense for what we're doing. But if it's not instrumental, then you run it once, close it, and then it will show up here, and you just tap on it. And in version 3 now, you can get the same interface that manufacturer makes and adjust it right here in LumaFusion.
Now I'm gonna cut you off for a little while because we stacked up so many questions. I want to make sure that we get to them.
Perfect.
Just while you're there, and then we'll come back to the future things that might be coming out. So let's go ahead and jump into the first question.
Sure. The first one comes from Douglas Carmichael. He says, how well does LumaFusion work on the M1 Mac? Does the touch interface translate well to mouse and keyboard?
Well, that's a really good question. For me personally, I prefer the touch interface. I mean, I just love it so much that when I open the M1, I can't stop but trying to touch my computer monitor. It's like, I know it's not going to work, but I still want to do it. So, but we have done things like for the M1, we've added, let's see, I don't know if you can add, my little QuickTime thing is red over it, but we've added a zoom slider and things that will make it possible to use the M1. It's, you know, what I believe is that in order to make a proper desktop version of LumaFusion, a lot of things need to be redesigned. So when we designed LumaFusion, we designed it specifically for touch, and every single feature we go through looking, is this findable? Is it usable? Is it understandable? Because remember, on a touch interface, in the beginning, there was no menus at all. So every icon, everything you do has to be, you know, right in your face, available. And we don't hide a lot of things in menus. So say you're using Final Cut. I've been in development for years and years with different companies. So I know what happens when you can't find the right place for a feature. Like you can't find the right UI, you put it in a menu because at least you made the feature and it's in a menu. And over the years, the menus get really deep, really complex, and not very understandable. So when we did LumaFusion, we really put a lot of effort into thinking through these problems, like how can you do that without a menu? It's a lot of work. Now, throwing it backwards to a desktop, yeah, you can do it, but I think the same holds true when you go back to a desktop. Things need to be rethought, redesigned, just jigged for a mouse.
And I often wonder whether Apple's going to eventually give us a monitor that's touchscreen that goes with the Mac Mini, so that you can just kind of. And Chris is like, no, that'll never happen. No, I mean, just
I think
they've addressed it in the past.
They have in the past, but the past is the past.
Yeah, they said, Gorilla.
Hold your arm up to your screen for a half hour, Alex, and tell me you really want to work that way.
It's not so much my screen. It's mostly I think about it down in front of me where I put my iPad and just being able to sit there and look at something and move it with my fingers.
And I think Apple's response was, then put your iPad in your lap.
Right. Yeah. It's just there's a lot of I/O in the Mac Mini.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is the iPad can handle 6 tracks of 4K media better than my desktop, and it's kind of amazing the foundations they've put into iOS for video playback.
And it does HDR playback as well, right?
It does HDR in 3 flavors.
What are those 3 flavors?
It is.
Is it HDR10, HLG?
HLG, PQ. Let's see. I wrote them down because I can never forget. Okay, HLG, PQ, or P3, as well as Rec 709, which isn't 10. And it's 10-bit. So this is a powerful machine all on its own. If I believe you should probably edit wherever you are feeling comfortable. So. There's if you're on a plane, you're obviously better off using an iPad than a laptop. Also, if you're pretty much anywhere else in your life where you want to interact with other people on location, the iPad is certainly the best choice. It's just.
Well, and we're looking at using it in some educational environments with LumaFusion specifically because the kids that we're working with all have iPads. So they, the idea is that that's what they have, and so that's the thing that they'll edit on, and so we're kind of moving that direction.
Yeah.
At least it's part of the program right now. So.
Absolutely, and it's also not hard to learn. So I have a 7-year-old that I taught him 2 things: that you can drag a clip to the timeline, and that you can double tap to get into all the editors. And he edits his own stuff now. He taught himself how to do it.
Are you doing, before we jump into the rest of the question, are you doing anything with the depth data from the cameras yet?
Not yet, no. I think there's some limitations about what we could do with that. But yeah, not yet.
Next question.
Yeah.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas, in this case, says, what audio interfaces do you see customers using most with their iPads and with LumaFusion?
Well, with LumaFusion, most of the time it's just you're going to hook up a microphone to do a voiceover.
And how are they interfacing with the microphone to LumaFusion? Do you know if it's a specific?
Yeah, like I have a Hype mic, and I just it has a USB-C cable. I just plug it in, or so direct in, and then if you go here to the voiceover tool, then you can select your gain and your sample rate. Also, it'll automatically pick up the microphone if you start a voiceover. So,
next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. Is LumaFusion optimized for a certain iPad size?
That's one of the challenges with developing LumaFusion is it's not only iPads but also iPhones. And yes, it's every single device configuration is worked on, the layout is worked on to make sure that it works. Sometimes, like on really small iPhones, we have to get rid of the less important buttons and find another option for displaying that feature. But yeah.
Next question.
And Jordan, Surrey, UK, and here on the panel, what are the on what spec iPad are you running your demonstration?
Oh, this is a very top of the line version, M1 12.9 iPad Pro.
Next question.
Grant Whitehead in Adelaide, Australia. Our friend says, how does LumaFusion handle Dolby Vision recorded on the iPhone 12?
Yes, that's a, it does handle Dolby Vision, but I don't know how. But yes, it does.
Yeah, we're a big Dolby Vision group.
I'm sure you are.
So we pay a lot of attention to that. Yeah, so good. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas. What features do you wish you could incorporate but cannot because of the ring fences within iOS?
Because of the ring fences, did you say? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's put it right out there. I wish we could have ProRes media in iOS. There's ways that we could get around that by developing our own encoder that would encode proxies for us from ProRes, so you could bring it in. We make proxies, you could edit. Then when you export, we could link back up to the original files, and that's on our roadmap. But it's quite a big job. So.
And the computer's got, at this point, iOS has the power to manage ProRes. It just doesn't do it.
Yeah, I have a feeling there's probably reasons for that are marketing and sales driven rather than functionality driven.
Yeah. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. What on larger devices, does LumaFusion work well with Bluetooth keyboards or mice? And are there supported keyboard shortcuts?
Yes, there's supported keyboard shortcuts, and we even have an overlay that you can buy from editor's keys and lay it right on top of your keyboard. And it tells you all the shortcuts, all color-coded and everything. And the second question, Bluetooth keyboards, I believe, yes, you can use a Bluetooth keyboard.
That's great. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Can you speak about what minimum and optimum hardware you recommend? Are there any specific features that benefit from more resources, the RAM, the processor, iPad, iPhone, M1 Max, and so forth?
Yeah, so your device, whether it's an iPhone or iPad, has to be able to run iOS version 14.3. And all the other things that happen or don't happen are based on what your device can do. So if your device can't play back 4K, then you can't play back 4K.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Terri, do I understand that the new iPads that have USB-C allow you to use that external drive process more efficiently than does it even work with the USB or the Lightning connector iPads as well?
Yes, it does. But you're not going to get the same speed as you are with the USB-C.
Next
Oh,
question.
I had one of those little dry. I mean, they're really great. They
little T5s, little Samsung T5s.
Yeah.
We have lots of them. Yeah.
I think you can get a hub so you could have multiples connected, I believe.
Yeah. This is what you're talking about, right? This little drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next question.
George Kennedy Jr. in Washington, D.C. is up next. And George says, can LumaFusion projects be brought into Resolve and Premiere Pro? If not, is this on a future roadmap development consideration?
So what most people are doing is exporting the XML for Final Cut and then using a converter to convert to Premiere. And that works in Resolve as well. And it's a really important feature for us to be able to export to XML, but I would say it hasn't really gotten the attention that we hoped it would, to be quite honest. So I can't see us putting that above some of our other more pressing features.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's the use case. I mean, maybe you'd have a rough edit that you work on the road and then you bring it in and throw it in. I know that in the times that I've used LumaFusion, it's mostly been traveling. You know, like I'm out and about. For me, you know, as someone who is mixing my time a lot between Final Cut and Resolve, that when I'm out though, you know, what I love is the fact that I can take an iPad out and I can shoot on it and I can, you know, cut on it and finish it and put it up, you know, somewhere for people to see without having to go out to anything, you know, and not having to wait for anything. Having it all self-contained and having the ability to professionally edit it. I have to admit that while I went to Final Cut really seamlessly from Final Cut 7 to Final Cut 10, I never really grokked iMovie, like the new iMovie, like the old iMovie I understood. The new iMovie I never really found my way into. So
yeah. And I like I said in the beginning, I mean, my favorite thing about LumaFusion is the timeline and the combined track-based editing, because I've been editing for, I don't know, 30 years, and I am a track-based editor. Mm-hmm. I accept the beauty and the power of a magnetic timeline. And so I have to acknowledge that and use it, but I still want the ability to output just a track or lower the audio on just a track. It's just part of who I am as an editor. So
next question.
Josh Kaufman of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Is LumaFusion a good tool to generate lower thirds and or graphics? And if so, what's the transport? Does it come out over NDI, HDMI, or what?
Okay. What's the transport for?
I think, Josh, you're trying to use it as an actual, like, pushing lower thirds out of it live. Oh, is that
as a single file? Or
I think it's not as a file. I think he's trying to push it out through the USB-C. Josh, go ahead and elaborate.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if your program is optimized for that. For example, on HDMI, you could just chroma key it, you know, and then send it out to another process that could use that as lower thirds to be able to do on the fly either graphics or lower thirds.
Yeah, you can create a multi-layer title in LumaFusion, and then you could let's see if I can find something. These are just the basic ones here, but I'm just going to grab one and stick it on there. So say you adjusted this title however you wanted. You can change colors and fonts and import fonts or whatever you want. And you can have as many layers as you want to create your thing. And then if you did it over black, you could export it. You can also add motions and things to it.
Could you export it live? Could you play it out live?
You would
the HDMI
export it, and in the export.
But could you? I think what Josh is trying to do is play it out full screen from LumaFusion. I think it's probably not the use case that it's built for.
Yeah, you would export it because you'd want the alpha channel. So you can export it with the alpha channel.
Right.
And then you could use it outside of that, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking, Joe?
Yeah, what a lot of us, because we have these little Atems, we want to play graphics over top of our videos live, and so,
live.
So
no.
he's trying to do that. I don't
Sorry,
think
I'm not a live environment person
yet.
So I didn't get the question, but yeah, I wouldn't say that would be our use. No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks. Next question.
Rupert McRae from Dallas, Texas is back with what workflows exist between LumaFusion and LumaFX?
Okay, so LumaFX is basically this in this effects engine, which you find in here, that has, you know, your blurs and other effects that you can do in a single layer. So it is not, LumaFX is already included in LumaFusion. So if you have LumaFusion, you already have LumaFX. If you don't have LumaFusion, you only have LumaFX, you're going to be working with one clip, and all you can do is modify that clip. Say you had a clip you just wanted to color correct, and then export at as close as possible to the original settings of that clip. You throw it in LumaFusion, LumaFX, put your color correction, export, and it's automatically going to try to match as close as possible the bit rate and everything else to that clip. So that's what it's for. It's really for a quick single clip workflow.
And that's really just something, if you're not trying to edit something, you're just trying to edit it. This is just kind of a subset that basically is just an effects processor. It's really interesting. I didn't know that it did that. It's great. Next question.
Georgie Kennedy in here in the panel many days says, can LumaFusion run on a Mac Mini M1? I think we addressed that, didn't we?
Mac Mini M1, yes. So it can run on any M1 Mac, and we're investigating doing a Catalyst version, because on that we could really utilize the ProRes and all the other features that we would like to.
Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Is the new external drive editing better for using with Narbox?
Right. It's, you know, if you have a USB-C drive, it'll work. And I don't know particularly, I think Narbox, yes, has a USB-C drive, and it's fine. Our original integration with Narbox lets you look at the media on the Narbox, and then as you drag it to the timeline, it's copied to your iPad. And there are some benefits to that. For instance, you don't want to take your Narbox with you, and you just want to have a backup of all the media used in the project. But yeah, it works either way. You could hook it up either way.
Next question.
Jason Panks in Nashville, Tennessee says, can you import a simple timeline from Final Cut Pro?
No, we don't. Well, no, that is not a feature that we have put in the app. Although when we tested, you know, the feature, we went back and forth, and it could work, but I think it might be a pretty big support nightmare. So we didn't put it in.
And probably not the typical use case. It seems like that would be a different use case. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather here in the panel says, my BlackBerry has finally gone end of life, replaced with a Galaxy. Will there be a version of LumaFusion for Android? There's Stuart's BlackBerry.
Yeah. Well, we've been investigating Android for some time now. And yeah, we'll see what comes of that.
Next question.
Next question, Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, here in the panel. What are the capabilities of the integration between LumaFusion and Frame.io?
Oh, that's really great. And let's see if I'm even hooked up to Frame.io right now. So if I go to Frame.io, okay, so with Frame.io, I can see, can you still see my device, right?
Yes, we can see the Frame.io window in the upper left.
Right, so let's see, I don't know who to infringe on, maybe myself here. So let's see, I'll just go into this one. So in the Frame.io, so right now I'm looking directly at my media in Frame.io. So if I tap on a clip, I will be able to play it, and I can see, I can scrub through that. I can add a Frame.io marker. Oh, I'm logged in as Chris Damaris right now. I forgot I did that, but I was testing something. So anyway, this is a comment. Now that comment will automatically be in Frame.io, you know, because I added it directly to Frame.io by doing that right in LumaFusion. If he responds, then, which he might be watching and he may respond, then we would get the comment right back here in this stack. So I could then be able to respond to that by changing my edit, for instance. And then if I upload my video, it'll do the versioning that Frame.io does and take all those comments with it. So yeah, it's a full integration. You can see comments, you can see graphics or annotations that are put on in Frame.io. You would see those here in LumaFusion.
Next question.
Comes from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. And is there a beta users group for testing new features in the future?
Yes. So if you want to be on the beta, we're just starting a new one here in a couple weeks, or a new group of testers, and you just email support@luma-touch.com and tell us a little bit about yourself, and you can sign up for the beta. And we communicate with our beta testers via Slack all day, every day. You can get answers and discuss what you want or what you didn't like about things or bugs or whatever.
Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles said, would it be possible to show a simple example of moving a LumaFusion project into Final Cut Pro?
Let's see. I don't know if I have even, let me see. I'd have to work on that. That might take me a little bit of time. But yeah, I mean, what I can tell you what goes across. So your video, your frame and fit effects, like for instance, if I was in here and I shrunk this down and moved it, anything with simple data that can go across in XML will be included in your Frame.io, in your Final Cut project. Things like titles that are custom, those would be rendered down into a file. So you'd get the title, but you wouldn't be able to edit it in LumaFusion, in Final Cut.
Go ahead, Bill.
Terry, is the export a clickable file, or is it an XML that goes out and then comes into Final Cut?
It's an XML that has all the media and data and a Final Cut Pro project. So basically, you open the zip file and double click on the Final Cut project, and it all links up and does what it needs to do.
Perfect. Thanks.
Next question.
Jason Panks, Nashville, up again with recommended external drives, USB-C versus Thunderbolt, for example.
Well, so USB 4 and USB 3 are apparently pretty similar, and there are some differences, but they don't really affect what we're doing with it. So anything that has a USB 3 or USB 4 would be fine. Thunderbolt, I guess, is pretty much USB 4. I'm not really sure. They've got a lot of naming conventions going on. I don't know if there's a true Thunderbolt out. It's probably USB 4, actually.
Next question.
Guy Cochran here on the panel from Seattle says, have you seen anyone run LumaFusion on a 20-inch plus Wacom Cintiq tablet with a Mac Mini M1?
So here we go.
That's very specific.
This is the supersize.
I don't get out much, so no, I haven't seen that.
So this is guys.
You're seeing it now.
How's it working?
Seems to be working fine. This is the M1. Let me actually cut to.
Oh wow, you're gonna
NDI.
show us.
Yeah, let me show the NDI play out. This might be a little bit.
Guy, can I just point out we're still in screen share for Terry, so people watching can't actually see what Guy's showing.
I'm gonna stop sharing so he can do that.
Here it is running on an M1. This is a. Let me cut back to my shot of my lap. This is a 24-inch big iPad. And this is the Cintiq 24-inch. So yeah, here's the pen, and I'm scrubbing back and forth. I can grab a clip. Grab a clip. Come on. Yeah, there's a clip. Drag it down, put it in there. Move around, play.
I like it.
There you go. Big old monster editing with a tablet or your finger, because this is This is the
Right.
touch version. I don't know if you can see my.
So you really,
Yeah, so I
with a
can-
Cintiq,
I
you
can
could have that giant screen that we were talking about and pretty much use LumaFusion the way it was designed. So you have a touch screen, but just a giant interface. It's really
That's
interesting.
Pretty
Might be.
cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, also, what I didn't mention is in this version, when you go out to a full, when you go out to a monitor in HDMI, either via HDMI or AirPlay, you get the preview in LumaFusion and the full res preview on the output. So, and that can be
Oh, that's great.
HDR or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question. I can't hear you, Bill.
The next one's actually an invite. Terry, you've been formally invited by Sky to the Pacific Northwest Office Hours gathering.
I'm so
And
thrilled.
so you're in like Flynn. You probably have VIP tickets waiting.
Thank you.
We'll make sure to get you all the particulars after the show. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next, and he says, would LumaFusion work for editing short movies on an iPhone? My friend Maddie uses an iPhone and is passionate about video making, but doesn't have an iPad.
Well, they're in good company. The BBC, RTE, all these news stations, especially in Europe, are doing all their movies with their iPhone. I mean, they shoot, they edit, and then they send it back to the station all from their iPhone. So they don't bother with doing anything else. and it works just fine. So a lot of them have made their own graphic packages, in fact, inside LumaFusion with the titler, so it matches their station graphics. And length is not an issue. Like, you have the magnetic timeline, you have insert, you have overwrite. It's just a matter of understanding those tools and knowing how to manipulate your timeline, and then you can do anything you want.
How do you transport graphics? So like if they have a set of lower thirds, is it easy for them to say, okay, we've developed these, now let's put them out to all of our people in the field?
So if they create them in LumaFusion, like they created a package, then they can zip that package up and share the zip file with everyone.
And how do they put them? How do they get that into LumaFusion on the iPad?
Oh yeah, when you just import with the import button. If I import media,
You just put it into your cloud, like your iCloud or whatever, find a folder and pull it in.
yeah, and then it looks in the zip file, sees where the files need to go. If it's titles or title presets, that goes to the titler and so on.
That's great. Next question.
Rupert McCrae wants to investigate in-app purchases. Are there some, and what are available if so?
Right. Right now, there's the XML export is an in-app purchase, and the let's see, Storyblocks. You can subscribe to Storyblocks, which is, I'm going to share my screen again. Share the iPad, and that's on still. So you've got this whole library of footage and a lot of ways of filtering that footage. For instance, if I just wanted transportation clips, you would be able to find those. And it also includes a music library. So that is our only subscription. And the reason—
And you built Storyblocks, or is that a third party?
It's a third party library.
And is it and when you're doing that, it's going up to the web and pulling those down and show them to you within the app?
Right. And so it has music, backgrounds, sound effects, and so on. So I don't know the price. I think it's $9.99 a month or $69.99 a year, but it's totally worth it. It's got just loads and loads of stuff in there. And I love the way we've got it. So you can filter by genre. You can also add to that the mood and also the instruments. So combining these, you could say, see, I want hip hop music that's, sad or whatever. I don't know if they make that, but you could. Yeah, so that's our subscriptions. But, if you have time, so we only have 15 minutes, and I wanted to—
We've got 4 questions. We'll just buzz through these real quick and then have you close up the hour here. We'll go real fast. Tommy, go ahead. Next question.
Is up next with, do LUTs run in LumaFX?
LUT import in LumaFX. It should. I'm not exactly sure if that was included in LumaFX. It's definitely in LumaFusion.
Great. And do you know how many points? The 33 points?
64.
64? That's great. Next question.
Carmichael, how much does LumaFusion cost on the App Store, and what iPhone models does it support? My friend Maddie would love to have it when editing on her iPhone.
Yeah, it's $29.99 or
something
like that on the App Store, and any device that will run iOS 14.3 or above.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas. How do you recommend we keep up to date with LumaTouch news? Is there a Twitter handle, newsletter, blogs? What would you suggest?
Yeah, on our website, luma-touch.com, you can go and follow us there and get on our mailing list.
That's great. Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas, up next. In what virtual or in-person conferences is LumaTouch exhibiting at, or which ones do you recommend?
Well, we have been at NAB until coronavirus, and we considered going again this year. We usually do Mojo Fest, which is the Mobile Journalists Festival. We usually do IBC and NAB. Of course, we didn't do any of that this year, and we're still not going to do that this year. It's just, or last year we didn't, this year we won't, and then following year we hope to be over this pandemic and we can start those again.
Next question.
Oh, Bill, you're muted.
I'm sorry. The final one comes from Roscoe Jones. Are there tools built in for moving assets onto and off of the iPad? What are the best asset management tools for saving those BBC News story assets back to the station?
Well, if you're connecting up to a desktop, then you can use iMazing. That allows you to see the whole file structure. Otherwise, I would just use the Files app in the device, and
are you able to collect
from there
a project?
You can send stuff.
You can collect a project. You can just grab this whole project and collect it out.
Yeah, you can take projects. Well, I would use the export function to actually export a project because it gives you a lot of options. But
right, that's great. Now we still have a little time for you.
Oh, great! I'm going to show
questions.
you something real quick then.
Yeah.
So let's see. I am going to. Okay, I'm just going to start a new project, and this one is going to be from MultiCam. And so this is. Let me be clear. This feature is not out yet, but it is coming in an update, and that will be an in-app purchase. So I'm going to go over here to my imported files. So this is a shoot that we did a couple weeks ago, one evening with our team, and we had 12 iPhones in a like an auditorium with a band and some dancers. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a multicam clip here. So in this clip, you see I've got 12 drop zones, and I'm going to go ahead and drop either one at a time into the drop zones, or I could go ahead and select everything except, let's see if I can unselect that and unselect that, and just drop these whole things into there. And now what you see is we've got all 12 running at once. I'll turn off my things. And they're not sunk up yet, but what I could do is go down here to this sync mode. And when this is all, we're just hooking up the sync modes right now, but you could set it by automatic, which will choose the best sync mode for your media. You can do time code, the audio waveforms, and I cheated these clips by trimming them so that they'll sync in manual mode. So in manual mode, I just have them starting all at the same time, and I could pick up and move them or nudge them if I needed. But at this point, then you have sunk your media, and it will all play in sync now. I don't know if you can see that, but they are sunk up and running. So this part of multicam is just about getting your media into a clip all sunk up. And then I'm going to say, finish and then insert and open switcher, because, if I already had a project going, I could just, add it to the project. And now you see now we only have one clip. Oh, by the way, in the last view, you can also add a master audio clip that does not get cut when you're cutting your cameras. So it would be used for sync, and it would also be here on this view. And in this view, I can choose my angles. Obviously, you can't hear the audio because I'm not hooked up right. I don't have that Atem. But as you can see, as I'm tapping on the angles, I can see the cuts I'm making below. And I'm just going to stop this here and go back and show what happens if I want to trade out a shot. So say I have this shot of from camera 9, and I really think it should be shorter. I would just park my cursor where I want it to be and choose a new angle. I can see I'm going, the next shot is camera 11. The previous shot is camera 4. So I'm just going to choose the overhead camera angle here. If I wanted to adjust an entire clip, I would just jump to the cut and again, choose a new angle. When you're done, you close the switcher and you have this clip. And this clip now can be on any timeline. And you can trim, you can move things and so on. So that's the little demo I have.
That's amazing. Looks super easy to use. Is it possible to explode those clips out later, or is it always stay in that clip?
You can go back to any of those views and be able to adjust things or change things out.
Go ahead, Stuart.
That's pretty amazing. I imagine anybody with a band that's doing a festival or anything like that is going to love that. But you just showed us footage from iPhones. Will there be support for things like the ISO files that come out of an Atem Mini switcher?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So we are still in development. So, I probably want to talk to you about that. And I think that
I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, other than you guys making sure that it works. So what the Atem switcher does is it saves all the ISOs out and an XML file. So it has of the edit. So what you actually cut from the hardware would save out. So it seems like something that with a little bit of work, you guys could bring that in to what you're doing, and it would be, I mean, it would be really, and it's H.264 records. So
that definitely sounds reasonable to me, and I'll talk to Chris about that.
Yeah, because I think that would be an amazing, for a lot of people, amazing connection. Go ahead, Roscoe.
And each one has time code tied to it.
Yeah,
right.
So they're already, it's already sunk. it's already sunk with an XML. Right. It's already being recorded to a T5 drive. So it seems like it would. I mean, I'm glad that Stuart brought it up, because now that my head's turning over, you could sit there and cut your show and literally just plug it into your iPad. And if you guys had it be seamless, it would just be like, "Hello, here I am," and in a multicam setting.
Sounds like a no-brainer to me, but I'm not Chris, and Chris has to code it, so I will talk to him about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to be clear, it is a Resolve XML that you'd have to do a little conversion on, but
I think that
doesn't
cool matter so much for this, because really a multicam edit is the simplest elk of edit, right? It's just cuts.
Yeah.
So I think we always think of these big events for multicam, but I think because it's traditionally taken quite a bit of gear and a bit of knowledge to do multicam, but simplifying it, we've simplified the interactions you need to do. Like, we don't make you assign cameras, you just assign them by dropping them in drop zones. And stuff like that means that people will be able to do simple, you're doing an interview with 2 cameras or 3 cameras, and you just want to be able to cut back and forth between the subjects. This is really functional for that as well.
And my mind's really kind of cranking on that. I mean, it just I mean, like, even if you think of a wedding and handing, a handful of people a bunch of iPhones and having them just wander around shooting, and then being able to deliver that video at the end of the night. One of the things that I was kind of surprised at is we did a 360 wedding. But one of the things we did is during the rehearsal day and during the day of the wedding, we shot lots of video in 360, and we actually had a viewing station in one of the yards behind where they were doing it. What I was surprised at is the end of the day, everyone's kind of tired. They've had a lot to drink, and sitting down and watching something is kind of fun. Being able to turn that over immediately with 360, but it could have been 16:9. It could have been something that we, you had a bunch of stuff and you were able to sync it up, and there was like a little movie of the wedding, of the rehearsal, of other things. And people would probably just come, if you had like a little theater room, in the, at a wedding space, it's not the final video that you're going to deliver to the bride and groom later, but it would be a really fun thing to have in the last hour of the thing, or if you had people out capturing a lot of that footage. And it would just be, what would be really interesting is the time is syncing up. Do you guys do anything that's tied directly to Filmic?
Well, I mean, we import their LUTs mainly, so yeah.
Yeah, because it would be interesting to like having their cameras, being able to sync the cameras and having them also, like if we think about things like camera to cloud, that Frame.io has, having a tight sync between LumaTouch, Frame.io, camera to cloud, Filmic, whatever. You could have a bunch of people out there shooting with time code, even time of day, but theoretically hard time code, and having it all just appearing in LumaFusion where it needs to be in time.
Yeah, and I think most of that is just in place naturally, just by the tools of those other two companies. So yeah, that's all. And I think that's a perfect example. You're at the ceremony, and by the reception in a few minutes later, you've got the whole video. It's just super engaging and fun.
Yeah, absolutely. We got one more question.
One last came in late, and Tommy Shantz in St. Paul says, would exporting a project to Resolve be seamless?
Seamless. So not exactly. There's one seam in that you have to go to export to Final Cut and then use a different tool to convert to Resolve.
There you go.
I believe.
Terri,
although,
thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Someone contacted us recently and said that they had done, they had brought the XML into Resolve and it worked perfectly. I don't know how exactly they did that, whether Resolve has a converter itself or not. I don't know.
Terri, thank you so much for your time. It's always good to see you.
Thank you. Oh, it was really fun as always.
You're always welcome to come back, hang out in the panel with us.
It wasn't
or
so
just watch.
Early, man. It's just so early here.
You get used to it. After a while, it just becomes the pattern. You just think of it this way: you get all the stuff out of the way before the day starts, and then you can just have the rest of your day. That's actually why it's in the morning, is so that I can go to work. So,
it's a lovely show. I really enjoy it, and I wish I could get myself out of bed earlier, and I'd be here more than you want. So
no, that's not possible. So we'd love to have you. So so thanks so much for coming, and we're really excited about where LumaFusion's going, and we'll look forward to when you release. I just want to put the invitation out. Once you release the multicam, come back, hang out with us, show us the finished product.
I'm sure it's going to change, and I'll look into that import for you of the.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, thanks to our producers who asked lots of great questions. Thank you very much. Well done, as always. To our panelists, well done. Great conversation, great answers, as always. 490 something or other that we've done in a row, and we still haven't missed one. So we're 490 something and zero as far as ones that didn't work. So a quick announcement, by the way, we did figure out what happened with, I think I mentioned it at the beginning, but if you're watching now, we did figure out what happened with Zoom. It has to do with the limit that you can't set more than 50 webinars in a row inside of Zoom, which we do. And I was doing it in smaller chunks. The key is the start date. You just have to change the start date. As soon as I moved the start date inside of the webinar, I was able to now extend that webinar. We had to change the webinar addresses unexpectedly on Monday. So anyway, so that was the reason. It took a little bit of back and forth with Zoom support. They were very supportive. And I don't know if they really found it, other than they just kept on asking questions. And as I did a screen capture, I suddenly realized, oh, what if I change this date? And that was the answer. So anyway, so it turns out if don't set more than 50. I think it's probably because Zoom never had anyone set more than 50 webinars in a row. So that we're just kind of on the outer edge. So we are going to go back to the old one for August. So over the weekend we'll switch back. Just know tomorrow will be the same webinar. This one. Sunday we'll switch back to the old one, and then we'll go on through August with that, and then after that we're going to probably move to streaming. So we'll stay tuned for that. Now, we'll see you either tomorrow morning, education, remember, and that's not streamed, or we'll see you in after hours, which is starting right